Hi, I'm Glenn Heemstra, and this is Futurist.com. I'm talking with Kana Hudson. Kana's been an associate of Futurist.com for a while now. She develops and delivers programs on the millennial generation. Kana, what is the millennial generation?
Well, the millennial generation is something that I happen to be a part of. It's basically the people that were born between 1982 and roughly 2000 or so. And a generation is defined as a group of people that were born during basically the same period of time. And so the millennials were all born in the 80s and 90s, and so they were shaped by social trends and political conditions and things that were going on during those decades. And so when we want to learn about millennials now and what they're doing today, we can look back to those decades to find out what are the things that really shaped who they are.
And what are a couple of things that really stand out to you when you're working with groups, teaching them about the millennials that you emphasize as important shapers of the millennial generation?
Right. Well, one thing, and you may remember this as a member of the older generation,
Thank you very much.
is during the early 1980s, the baby boomers were really starting their families and starting to have kids in very large numbers. So there were 76 million baby boomers roughly. And so all of a sudden they had 80 million kids in the matter of, a couple of decades. And so at that time, in the 1970s, there were hardly any kids at all, really, demographically. And then all of a sudden there are all these kids, and so the nation really started to focus on the family and children. So you see things happening like in the early 80s, even Las Vegas became a family destination all of a sudden. And you see baby on board stickers on cars and just a lot of focus on children as a whole. So that leads into, today, millennials had a childhood where they were really paid attention to, at least a lot of them were. And that's not true of all millennials, of course, but as a whole, that's sort of a general trend that was going on.
And when you're working with an organization, and as you know, we get calls from organizations who want to learn about the millennials because they're hiring them. Mm-hmm. How do you encourage them to understand the millennials, or how do you help them learn about the millennials? What are a couple of things that you do or emphasize?
Right. Well, really the key thing, as I mentioned, is to look back to those decades to find out what are the things that shape who millennials are today. And rather than, just listing off characteristics like millennials have a sense of entitlement, or millennials all, are good at working in teams, for example, we can look back to the things that they experienced as a group in the 80s and 90s that really shape who they are today. Another problem with just looking at generalizations when it comes to understanding a gigantic group of people is that it's stereotyping, and that's not going to be a very effective way to work with millennials. And so I really encourage people to really get to know millennials and interact with them, and that's really effective in two ways. First, you get to know people as individuals. If you're at work, walk over to your local millennials cubicle, start a conversation with them, get to know them. And that's going to work, first of all, because you'll actually get to know them as a human being. And then second of all, because that sort of highly interactive relationship approach works well with a lot of millennials who had a lot of highly involved adults in their lives when they were growing up, and they might crave that kind of relationship even as they enter the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the programs that you offer is Meet the Millennials, and I assume it's the kind of things you've just been talking about. A second program is Values for a New Generation. What are a couple of the core values that you think you're seeing in the millennial generation that are important for the future?
Right. The thing about the millennials is that we're all coming of age now, and there are a lot of really important things going on in the world, whether it's the political conditions of today or the state of the environment. These are the issues that are really shaping our decisions about lifestyle and the values that we're going to hold for the rest of our lives. And so older generations can actually look to millennials as leaders because millennials aren't so entrenched in the same habits and aren't accustomed to certain things. So one of the really important trends, for example, is community and service. And those two kind of go together. Millennials are as a trend, very involved with each other. You see things like Facebook, for example, being really important to millennials, and maybe to older generations, it's just, you know, a toy, but it's actually something that's very important to us in terms of relating to one another, keeping in touch with one another. And it's also been a catalyst for political movements, as we see with the election of Barack Obama, how much of that was done online and with young people mobilizing. And you also see, you know, a push to be more involved with each other and with our communities, and to contribute through service with each other.
One of the issues that interests me is small housing, sustainability, the environment.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a big issue with the millennials?
Absolutely. That's a really important one. The environment, of course, is on everybody's minds right now, but it's really key for millennials who are really getting out on their own for the first time and making their first big decisions about housing and transportation, and, you know, being attentive to resources as we live our lives and make decisions. And so you see things like many more people taking public transportations and making decisions about having smaller houses rather than the McMansions of the 80s and 90s. And those are things that millennials are really taking a leadership role in.
That's interesting. I just saw an article on the increase in use of public transit in 2008, despite the decrease in gas prices, that the numbers kept going up. So that might be reflective of that generation driving that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, another program that you offer is called Diversity in the Millennial Generation. Is this millennial generation less diverse, more diverse? How do you deal with diversity in terms of this generation?
Right, and diversity is really key to understanding the millennials, because it's such a big group of people, and it's also incredibly diverse in terms of race and culture, and a lot of millennials have immigrated, and so you can't take any characteristic and apply it to everybody simply because we're so diverse. And so an assumption, a misguided assumption, might be that because we grew up well past the civil rights movement and we're much more diverse than other generations, we don't need to think about it anymore. But that's certainly not the case. It just means issues of diversity are much more complex and still need to be addressed in new and innovative ways.
Okay. And in the programs that you do, describe, are they keynotes, speeches, are they workshops? What's the variety of programs that you're offering?
Right. Well, I offer several hour-long workshops that are on any of the 3 topics you mentioned, and I also have half-day workshops as well as consulting and customized programs. Very
good. So those are programs about the millennial generation developed by Konna Hudson. I'm Glenn Heemstra at Futurist.com. Come and visit us at Futurist.com, call Konna, call us, and we'll be happy to arrange something for you. Thank you.